Welcome back to the Crash Course podcast. My name is CraigCrash Collins, and today we have some special guests on the podcast, John and Biggs from Midcourt Madness. As we are here, March Madness is here. We're ready to go. It's time to talk about the tournament, break it all down. So whether or not you're watching on 3C Media over on YouTube, whether you're watching us live twitch.tv/CraigCrash, or whether you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard, we are happy to have everybody in. And before we get into the madness, before we break everything down here, John, Biggs, go ahead and introduce yourselves. Tell us maybe your favorite basketball team, favorite March Madness memory, something like that.
Well, first off, thanks for the great intro there, and thanks for having us. I'm John. Obviously, this is Biggs over here, and we're the co-hosts of Midcourt Madness podcast, and been doing it about a year. We enjoy doing it. We enjoy talking college basketball. As far as, let's see, you said favorite teams. I know I'm a North Carolina fan. I know Biggs is also a North Carolina fan, but I wouldn't say he's as big as me. I think he sours on them a little more than I do. Would you get that, Biggs?
Yeah, that's accurate. I'm Biggs. That's definitely an accurate statement. I'm more of like a fan in that there are two types of fans. There's fans who just ride hard for their team no matter what and just always believe. And then there are those fans who hate their team no matter what. And I'm the fan that hates my team and can't stand them. And I judge them through a much more critical lens.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. You need that balance. You need that. In any fan base, you need those groups of fans that are obnoxious. Hey, we're gonna win every year, and you need those ones that are like, you know what, this year it's gonna be really rough. It's how it goes sometimes. I know. As a someone who lives in a state where you have IU fans, Purdue fans, you get a lot of that. So yeah, it's gonna be an exciting tournament. I'm excited to get into the weeds here. And so let's go ahead and jump right into it. We'll start off here. Looking at the one seeds in the bracket, you've got Gonzaga. They're 26-3, the West Coast Conference champs. They made 2 of the last 4 NCAA tournament championship games. They have WCC Player of the Year Drew Timm and Chet Holmgren, who's likely to be a top 3 pick. Although, I mean, if you just saw him walking down the street, you wouldn't think so. But you've got you have Arizona, who's 31-3, Pac-12 champs. They were unranked at the beginning of the season, barely in the top 30 according to Sports Illustrated. Third in the country in points per game, plus 18-point differential. So I mean, you could say they play in the Pac-12, but they also beat the bricks off of everybody they play, which is pretty good. You've got Baylor. Defending champions, 26-6, lost to the Big 12 tournament quarterfinals. They're first in strength of record, 5-3 against ranked teams, including back-to-back wins over Kansas and Texas in the closing weeks. But you're might be kind of hesitant to pick them, to go very far because, well, not necessarily very far, but to win the championship because you haven't had a repeat champion since Florida in 2006 and 2007. Then you've got Kansas, which I've been sour on Kansas since I picked them in 2008, and you have Ali Farouk-Madesh coming out of nowhere, dropping threes from the sky. So, but they're a 1 seed, and as a 1 seed under Bill Self, they lost in the second round in 2010. That's where I was mentioning earlier. Yeah, 2008 is when they won. 7th seed, they've made 7 Sweet 16s, 6 Elite 8s, 2 Final Fours, 1 national championship. So you look at their history of being a 1 seed. They don't get to the Final Four as often as you think they might, or how much you think they should. So, as far as 1 seeds go, which 1 seed has you maybe the most confident going into March Madness? Is about hey, if I'm filling out my bracket, and I might be hesitant to pick all 1 seeds. What's the one I have to have there?
Well, I think what makes this year so fun is that last year you go into the tournament at this time a year ago, it's Gonzaga versus the field, right? They're so much better than everybody else. They blew the doors off of every single team they played. And if there was one team that everybody thought maybe, okay, could this team beat Gonzaga? It was Baylor. Baylor crushed everybody too. And we've kind of forgot they were a COVID pause really away from being viewed on the same level as Gonzaga was last year. Lo and behold, those two teams both roll all the way through the tournament, meet in the championship game. And 2 minutes into the game, it's over because Baylor is so much better. But the point is that there was 1, there was 2, and there was just a giant precipitous drop right between the rest of the rest of the college basketball world. It doesn't feel like that's the same case this year. It's a lot more flat. All 4 of these teams, I feel like there are warts and flaws, and it's going to be really truly matchup dependent. Can somebody expose some of those flaws? Honestly, the one seed that I feel the least good about, like the team that I don't think is the best, the worst one seed I think is Kansas. Um, and you kind of just named it, right? Like they've had so many times in March where they have a hiccup. Like, they're always a 1 or a 2 seed. It feels like every other year. So like anytime they don't go far, they're probably choking or getting upset by someone. But I think their side of the region is. I just don't see a team that's really all that great. Like I think if they're going to get beat by somebody before the Final Four, it's going to be one of those upsets where it's like, whoa, Kansas got upset by someone? Because, I mean, Auburn is the 2 seed in their region, a team that really hasn't played well in the last month and has a couple of guards that don't seem to realize that their best players are actually big guys and they just want to shoot a lot. And Wisconsin, it's just hard to wrap your mind around that team having the juice to go to a Final Four. And then Providence, which a team that we're going to probably talk about later, is a trendy upset pick in the first round as your 4 seed. So I just think the way the bracket breaks, it's not because Kansas has like this incredible outfit and they're just stacked, but their region is just not great.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. The thing with
No,
Kansas
no. That's bad radio.
I'll offer up another one. Don't worry, I'll offer up another one. But no, like it's weird thing about Kansas and all the times they've been number one, and all the times they've been, highly rated and just have all this star power, all these one and dones, and they have one national championship under the Bill Self era. Like it's weird to think that.
All the way back in 2008 too, so it's not like recent or anything like that.
Yeah, and even that was a little fluky. They needed Mario Chalmers to bail them out in regulation. But with these number one teams, Baylor, yes, they're a very good team, but they're dealing with some very recent injuries with Chama Chachoa, my boy T Squared, and LJ Cryer also has some injury woes right now too. Gonzaga is another team who they made 2 of the last 4 national championships, like you said, but they're another team that you could look up on. I'm not sure which days they play, but you could look up that second round and they're struggling against Memphis or Boise State. Like they have had that happen where they lose that second round game. But for Arizona, I think that's one that I'd have to go with. I like their chances in their bracket. They're hiring Tommy Lloyd is paying off big dividends immediately. They have their roster isn't that different from a year ago. Like they had Ben Mathurin, Christian Coloco, Azuolas Tubelis. They had all these guys a year ago too, but what he's been able to do with them has just been tremendous this year.
Real quick before we go into hot or cold, is Gonzaga for real? Like if I were to, if you're picking them to win the Final Four or the national championship, are you crazy? Because again, like we mentioned, how they seem to always get there. Last week when I did the tier list, I was like, it's one of those, I'll believe it when I see it, so I'm almost afraid to pick it until it maybe happens once. Although that may be the only time it happens, if it happens once.
Yeah, absolutely. They're legit. I mean, it's not that long ago that Scott Drew was like a punchline for teams always choking in March, right? Baylor used to always choke like crazy, and all of a sudden Scott Drew's morphed into like the coach that we trust the most to just like band-aid a competitive team together. I mean, they win a ton. They've had teams good enough to do it in the last handful of years, not just the teams that have been in the national championship game in 17 and 21, but 19 they got knocked out by Texas Tech, and they had a team that had like Rui Hachimura and Brandon Clark. They had a squad good enough there too. They're really good. Drew Timme is as good of a true 5 as there is in the country. Chet Holmgren kind of pull pairs with him to make like a front court that I don't think it's like as you're a Purdue guy, so like you run into a team like a Purdue, and I think that can give Gonzaga trouble because Drew Timme is like they're both skinny, right? You notice it. Chet Holmgren, he's thin and bones. It's uncomfortable looking at how skinny that guy is, and Timmy's not exactly a beef eater up front either. So I think there are teams that can give them a challenge in that regard. You can always, if you run into a team that get super physical, they can give them trouble. But Andrew Nembhard is like one of the better kind of true point guards around the country. Like he's really solid, and they've just got a really good like top 8 guys, and their offensive efficiency is always among the highest in the country. And yeah, they're just kind of so. I think they're always consistent. Like they get a little boring, and we have to find a way to poke a hole in like where's the issue here, and could Memphis give them a hard time? And I think they end up just kind of running circles around a lot of these teams. And I mean, they did it last year until the national championship game where they got punked a little bit. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, if they're the team that cuts down the nets, I mean, yeah, we're talking about a team that's got 3 losses by probably a combined like 15 points all season.
Yeah, no, and I would also not be surprised if they cut down the Nets either. But just for good radio, I'm going to go the opposite of Biggs here and say that they are a deeply flawed team. They're going to lose to Memphis in the second round.
Hey, I mean, it could happen. March is crazy. So going now into the bracket here, we're going to break it down region by region or hot or cold, where I'm going to give you a take and you let me know whether it's a hot take or a cold take. Normally I would participate, but I'm going to let the experts take the floor here when we do hot or cold. And we're going to start with the West region. The first take here is Duke is the only ACC team that will make it out of the first weekend. The ACC has 5 bids, which is their lowest since 2013. They outbid the Mountain West by just 1, which is wild. You have Duke, which is number 2 in the West. You have Notre Dame, who's the 11th seed. And we talked off air about how that's the second best team in the conference is in a play-in game. They play Rutgers, and if they win, they will play number 6 Alabama. You've got number 8 UNC against number 9 Marquette, which the winner will likely get number 1 Baylor in the East region. You've got number 11 Virginia Tech against number 6 Texas. Winner gets the winner of number 3 Purdue and number 14 Yale. And you've got Miami. They're the 10 seed playing the 7-seeded USC Trojans in the Midwest region. The winner likely plays number 2 Auburn. So is the ACC really kind of Duke and everyone else as far as this tournament goes?
Yes.
All
And I'm
right.
not sure. Are we supposed to say hot take right off the bat? Because that's
Yeah,
a hot
yeah.
take.
You can say it off the top. You can build suspense, whatever you guys want to do.
I'll let
Inverted
Biggs build
pyramid style. Get to it.
I'll let Biggs build the suspense over there while I talk. It's a hot take. And I'd say, I'm gonna go, if I had to pick one other team that is like the most likely to make it out of the first weekend, I'm actually sort of taking the one that is, seated a little lower. Virginia Tech is a team who they struggled early on in the year. They're a team that I expected to be a top 3 or 4 team in the ACC early on. But then, they struggle a bit. They get hot a little late. They go into the ACC tournament as the 7 seed. They need a buzzer beater to beat Clemson. And if they don't get that, they're in the NIT right now. They then go on to beat, who they play before UNC? Notre Dame. They beat North Carolina and then Duke just to get in the tournament. And so, we talked about them earlier this year where Storm Murphy is a guy who is a transfer from Wofford who we expected to have a big year. But we looked up in December and like they're struggling a bit. And Biggs and I were both like, Storm Murphy is kind of looking like a mid-major guard, which is what he was before. And getting into a better conference and is, struggling with the increased speed, the increased size. And it seems like lately, though, he's sort of figured it out. And then they have Keve Aluma. Another couple nice pieces are Justin Mutz and Hunter Couture, who could stroke it from deep. So, I could see them beating Texas, and I hate to say it, Craig. I know you're a Purdue fan. They could get the best of Purdue in that second round too.
Yeah, I'm. That's what I'm worried about for sure, potentially happening.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, John, we've had like a season-long kind of show bet thing, and one of them is that John is he's an ACC lover. He's all about the ACC. And I am a ACC hater. I didn't think there were even going to be 4 teams in the league making the tournament. We've got 5 in, so this is going to be a little bit awkward. But I actually think it's a cold take. I think at least one other ACC team does get to the Sweet 16. You had good stuff there on Virginia Tech. I kind of am with you. For some reason, I look up and I'm imagining like I kind of equate a lot of like this year's Purdue to last year's Illinois. Like I think they've got like the superstar guard who just looks like he doesn't belong in college basketball anymore, similar to what Illinois had last year with Ayo Dosunmu. And then the Purdue big guys are kind of like Kofi Light in that like I don't think we've slowly gotten around to like, boy, if you put one of those Purdue big guys in like some sort of ball screen and make them run around in space, they're a fish out of water. They have a really hard time, and that's kind of like where the Purdue's defense is going to get them. And it's not going to be against everybody. And I think everybody talks about how you're going to beat Purdue, and it's you got to have size. Well, nobody has the size to beat Purdue. You can't beat them at their own game. That's like trying to beat, those Kentucky teams with like more athleticism. It's just like you're not going to do it. And so I think the team that is equipped to maybe give them trouble is Virginia Tech, a team that has mobile big guys who they're small compared to Purdue, but they're a lot more motion based. It's a lot more kind of running and cutting. And every time you watch Purdue guys play it, like Jaden Ivey, you watch him play defense off the ball, and like you might as well just give him a chair and then play 5-on-4, because like he's just kind of standing around waiting, like, when do I get the ball and can go shoot again? He's ready for the NBA in that sense. Like he's bored on defense. Like if he gets stuck on Hunter Couture is going to have about 10 wide open threes. That could be a matchup that's intriguing. And the other one that I think could be an ACC team to look out for, and that I'm intrigued by to see advance, is Miami, a 10 seed. They get USC in the first round, and then they get Auburn in the second round. Kind of goes back to that region with Kansas as the top seed. I don't love the way Auburn's playing, and I don't love the way I think USC is a bit of a paper tiger as that 7 seed. And not that Miami is like some sort of a juggernaut, but the old adage that guards always win in March. Well, Miami's got like 4 of them, and Cameron McGusty and Charlie Moore, who's like older than all 3 of us, and Isaiah Wong. All 3 guys can really like break down defense, get into gaps, create easy shots. And it's just all about those guards that can make plays in March. And like Miami's got a ton of them, and the firepower. I could see them getting on a heater and making a little run.
Now, you brought up Purdue a few times in that second round matchup. Let's go ahead and move on to the East region. I gotta ask, just you mentioned my Purdue ties here. Is Purdue a Sweet 16 team? I've breaking down this season for Purdue, I thought it would be the most Purdue thing ever if the season where they were ranked number 1 for the first time ever, they lose in the first weekend. But also, they can also be a team that they wait until they get your hopes up before they totally come down and smash them, and right now they're in a spot where, kind of you might be a little down on them, especially after the way they kind of ended the season and the way, I think, 5 of 6 of their losses have been, have come in the last like 30 seconds of the game. So, is Purdue a team that can make the Sweet 16? How much confidence should we have in that?
I would say I am 65% confident that they will make the Sweet 16. They're a team that has all the talent in the world. Biggs talked about Jaden Ivey. They talked about, their 2 big men. Sasha Stefanovic is a guy who can just absolutely stroke it. And they have other guards too. Eric Hunter is another example of a great player. And I remember early December, I had a friend text me, and he's not as much into the college basketball world as I am, but he texts me and he goes, I think that Purdue had just become number 1. And he just goes, like, is Purdue actually legit? I said, yeah, and for all the reasons I just said a bit ago. But recently, I've soured on them. You mentioned they've been struggling recently. And if you pull up the KenPom, Biggs likened them just a bit ago to Illinois. I would compare them to Iowa from a year ago. If you look at KenPom, Purdue is 3rd in offensive efficiency, but 100th in defensive efficiency. Whereas Iowa a year ago was 3rd and 75th. And what happened to Iowa last year? They get in the second round against Oregon, a team who had all these guards and had all these shooters. And Iowa wasn't a good defensive team, and they lost by 20. So, with all this talent, I could see them cutting down the nets early April. I could also see them, walking off the floor as losers before the end of the weekend.
We don't live in Purdue country, so correct us if we're wrong, but like the vibe I get when I watch Purdue, they strike me as a team that, whether or not they're like basketball teams have to play a certain way depending on like the time and the score, right? It's a situational sport, and you play a certain way if you're up 10. You play a certain way if there's 3 minutes to go and you're down 4. It feels like Purdue is just like that open gym team. And they're always playing the exact same way, no matter what the score is, no matter what the situation is. And it's like, God, you watch them in the right 2 or 3 minute stretch. And they have guys who can shoot. They've got a guard who is the most talented kid in the country from a perimeter perspective. They've got 2 big guys who are probably, if you were to drop a ranking of centers in college basketball, they probably both rank in the top 10. They've got a coach that we love, Matt Painter. He's one of the best coaches around in the country. And yet it just feels like there's just something that just not adding up. And it feels like they play the same way no matter what. I can't put my finger on why that is, because there's no reason why they're not good enough to go to the Final Four. That's the most talented Purdue team that I can remember. Maybe since probably more talented than those teams with like Hummel and Jawan Johnson and Etwan Moore.
Right.
Right. I mean, those teams are really good. I think this one's better in terms of just like your pure like NBA Live Madden ratings. But I don't know why. It just feels like there's something not quite like there in the head. I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird because it seems like every year we're talking about them doing something in the tournament. The last three, I think, out of their last 6 tournament appearances, 3 have ended in the first weekend. When obviously, as a Purdue fan, you've got a lot higher hopes. I have noticed a few times this season Jaden Ivey maybe doing a little bit too much, trying to impress those guys at the next level. Where you kind of wish like, hey, that might not be the best idea for right now in this moment of the game. But yeah, it's. We were talking about at the beginning of the season, B. Scott and I, about how this team could potentially, get farther than, you mentioned that Robbie Hubble team that, could have maybe made it to the Final Four if it wasn't for the injury. But yeah, it's just, it seems like they can't get out of that almost tournament purgatory of like, hey, yeah, every year really good, but for whatever reason, whether it be Robbie Hummel getting hurt or whether it be, just coming up of, a couple of shots short against Virginia a couple of years ago, they just can't seem to get over that hump. So, yeah, but honestly, like I said, we'll see if once they get into the tournament, if they're able to, finally buck that trend. I'm going to keep it in that region selfishly because I also want to ask if UCLA is going to make a Final Four run. I say it selfishly because at the beginning of the year, they were one of my Final Four teams. And last week on the tier list, I had them as an Elite Eight team. I'm really hoping, I thought at the beginning of the year, I was like, this is UCLA's conference to lose. It's the Pac-12. We always, on the show talk about how, that conference for whatever reason can't just get out of its own way as far as, getting back to prominence. And then out of nowhere comes Arizona. So can UCLA make that journey like they did last year?
They could. Out of that region, though, you talk about them, if they can make the Final Four, I would put Purdue, Kentucky, and Baylor as higher odds to make the Final Four than UCLA. And Biggs and I have talked about this since conference preview season. Was last year's run a fluke? And they've obviously had their moments. They've got some big wins. They lost to Gonzaga by 20. That's about the worst loss this year. They have wins against Arizona, USC, 2 wins against USC. But I don't know. They have these games they lost to Arizona State in triple overtime earlier this year. And so I just don't see it. I think last year was a little fluky. One other thing to consider is, last year there was very little travel compared to this year. They went to Indianapolis. All the games were in Indianapolis. They're going to have a lot more travel this year. If they make it to second weekend, they're going to be traveling somewhere else. So that's another thing to consider. But, we'll toss over to Biggs here. But, I think last year was fluky, and I don't think they're going to make the Final Four.
I disagree. Yeah, I mean, I think that's is it a cold take if you're right or a hot take if you're right?
So I know I haven't really been adhering the last few questions to the hot or cold style. I've just been asking the questions. But so the take here would be UCLA is a Final Four team, so it would be cold if you disagree, hot if you agree.
Okay, I'm with you. Hot. Heat me up. Heat me up on UCLA. It's hot in California, I think, or it's supposed to be. It's hotter there than it is here. So I'm with you on this. Yeah. And that's not because I love UCLA or I even love that the road that they might have to go through could include. I mean, if they're going to get there, in theory, you're going to have to probably beat like an Indiana, a team with some talent. You might have to beat a Baylor team, but we just kind of talked about that's a team that's not exactly peaking right now. And you're going to have to beat probably like a Purdue or a Kentucky or some basketball royalty school there that's got some high-end talent. But count me as a believer. I think this UCLA team is I feel like they early in the season they took that big ass loss to Gonzaga, right? And I feel like the rest of the country just kind of turned their brains off to UCLA. It's like, okay, I'm out. They don't start until 9:00 at night or 10:00 at night or 11:00 at night. No need to watch this anymore. I'm just tuning out. And they have taken some weird losses, but they've mostly been good. And I think they've dealt with a lot of injuries. So some of that, not in terms of guys missing huge chunks of games, but Johnny Juzang and Jaime Jaquez, they're 2 best players. have just been kind of banged up at different points in the year with ankle stuff. I think those two guys are playing well, and they're getting healthy. Jaime Jaquez is he's one of our favorite guys as a pod. He's coming in averaging like 24 points a game over his last 5 or 6 games. Like he's on a tear right now. And I think Mick Cronin is a coach that he's another coach that he hadn't done really much until last year. Now, coaching Cincinnati in the tournament is a little different than coaching UCLA, but I think the formula works. The formula in March is: do you have good guards? Do you play defense? Do you play at a slower tempo? Because I think that's what they do, and they've got guys who at the end of the game you trust to go get quality shots and quality offense. I'm in, and Mick Cronin also dresses up. So, I don't care about the travel. He's still a coach with some integrity. He wears a suit, and none of these other coaches do that. They've all gotten lazy in COVID, and Mick Cronin's keeping it tight. He keeps the suit on. He is the new Jay Wright, and we need to respect this man.
Is he better looking than Jay Wright though? With
the suit on. With the suit on, yes, absolutely.
Suit always adds a little bit of a little extra juice.
Yeah, he goes from a 5 to like a 9.
Moving over to the South region, hot or cold, Tennessee has the best chance to make it out of the South region. You've got the Vols, who are coming in after an SEC tournament that saw them win the tournament, the whole thing, beating the likes of Kentucky and the upstart Texas A&M along the way. They won 9 of their last 10 going into the tournament. They beat Arizona by 4 in the regular season, who is in their bracket as and they did lose to Villanova by 18, who's also in their bracket. But it was in November, so that was very different basketball than what we're playing now. They also have beaten Kentucky 2 of the 3 times they played them, and they beat Auburn, who are both Kentucky and Auburn are both 2 seeds. So and they're the only 3 seed in the tournament right now to have won their conference. So does Tennessee have the best chance to make it out of that South region?
Close, but no. I'm still giving that to Arizona, but Tennessee is a team that I do really like. I do think that if they were to meet up with Villanova in that Sweet 16 round, I do think that they'll get their revenge. And it's interesting, they have Biggs just talk about tournament time is just all about the guard play. They have Kennedy Chandler, who's great point guard, Santiago Vescovi, and then Zakai Ziegler is another just sort of pitbull type of guard who has sort of exceeded all expectations. He's a freshman. He was, I want to say, like a 3-star recruit coming out of high school. So he wasn't expected to be, this 9 points per game scorer, but he's been great for them. And then, they also have, great big guys too. John Fulkerson's a great guy. But, I would say, as far as your take though, I'd say, Arizona is going to come out of that region in my opinion. But I do see that, I think that they can give them a run for their money in the Elite Eight.
I always, when the bracket comes out, we obviously fill out like that first round. We're looking for what's that first round game that's going to be really exciting. What are the best first round matchups? And then I'm always so nervous to look forward and try to look at last year, the Sweet 16 matchup that we all wanted was Illinois against Oklahoma State. So we get Ayo Dosunmu against Cade Cunningham in that Sweet 16 matchup. And inevitably, one of those teams, actually both those teams, had to lose.
Yep.
And so it's always a fool's errand to look forward and potentially project at that Sweet 16 matchup. But I'm going to do it anyway. I think if Villanova Tennessee match up in that Sweet 16 game, I think that one would be an awesome Sweet 16 matchup. I hope those two teams get there. I think there's a good chance that they will, just because I do think that both those teams they're the 2 and 3 seed, right? They should. I will say cold take though. I think not only does Tennessee, they're good enough, right? I mean, there was a reasonable case that they probably should have been a 2, maybe even probably a 1 over one of the lower 3 seeds that they ended up getting. And I think that's going to hurt them, that you have to potentially beat Villanova, a team that is always consistent in the tournament. They've got great guards, just like Tennessee does. It's a team that plays great defense, plays slow. Villanova morphing into Virginia is one of the most under-talked about things, I think, that college basketball space out there. Nobody realizes this except us. Villanova used to be a team that played fast, pitch it around, a bunch of shooters. They are now the new Virginia, and they play super slow. They execute. They don't make any mistakes. They never turn the ball over. And a team like that's just going to be really, really hard to beat. And so I like them. I like them probably more than Tennessee. Should they play Arizona again? I think I like Arizona a little more than Tennessee as well. Um, I like Tennessee, but I just think this region is stacked, and so it's just going to be really hard.
Yeah, it is going to be a really tough bracket. Now moving on to the Midwest region. My take here is South Dakota State is this year's Cinderella team. They're the 13th seed. They played number 4 Providence in the first round, which I didn't, Providence, in my opinion, didn't really pass the eye test. So those conferences like the Big East and some of those, kind of, they're mid-major conferences, but we don't kind of look at them like mid-major conferences because they're full of teams that used to be in major conferences. It's just kind of all, it's hard to kind of value what these teams are. But South Dakota State is the second best scoring team in the country behind Gonzaga, 87 points per game. They hit 45% of their 3-pointers, which is the best in the country. So I feel like if they can get hot shooting, they can get dangerous.
I'm saying it's a hot take. I absolutely love South Dakota State as an upset pick here. The lead scorer is Douglas Wilson. He averages about 16 points per game. But if I'm going to channel my inner John Rothstein right now, I'm going to say buy stock in Baylor Shireman. He's a left-handed shooting guard, 6'6", 6'7", can score in many different ways. He can pull up from 3. He can take you down to the block and do all sorts of fadeaways and turnaround jump shots. Just a great all-around player. And South Dakota State has not lost a game since December. They ran through the Summit 20-0. They won all 3 of their Summit League games. North Dakota State did give them a run for their money, but South Dakota State is hot right now, and Providence is a team who is, I'd have to check KenPom again, but every time I've looked, they have been the number 1 ranked in the luck factor on KenPom, which I'm not entirely sure how they come up with that. But they are the luckiest team in college basketball. There's been instances where they play a team and they just happen to not have their best player, for example. And so, South Dakota State is a team that I can see I shouldn't say easily beating Providence, but I am picking them. And then chances are they'd play Iowa the following round. And Iowa is another team who, they've been hot recently, but another team that they could also be upset.
Yeah, I'm gonna be the wet blanket here on this. I'm gonna be the rain cloud on this parade because I like South Dakota State. They rank 220th in defensive efficiency. We're conveniently leaving that out with all these conversations. They don't play any defense. I think South Dakota State's gonna be fun, but I do not think they play good enough defense. Now, the first round matchup, I guess we have to define what Cinderella is. Is a Cinderella like a team that wins 2 games, or is it win 1 game? Is it win go on the Final Four run?
I mean, I would say especially with some of the lower seeds like a 12, 13, 14, I would say getting out of the first weekend because those are the because you can think March Madness, of course, there's going to be a few teams along the line that even if they played that team again, 50 other times, this is the one time they just happen to win. Whereas that second game, I think, pushes it past into Cinderella conversation because you're in the Sweet 16. You've made it past that first weekend. It's a little less of just kind of like, you chalk it up to a little bit less of, it's just, the tournament, and that's how it goes sometimes. Like, once you get to that second weekend, I think it kind of changes things and kind of turns you into like, maybe could they make the Final Four? So I think that's where you get the difference.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. So with that criteria, I guess, in mind, I think they're good enough to beat Providence. Sure, I think I'll pick Providence just because in my weird contrarian mind, I think everybody now has like sniffed out the luck thing, and so everybody's going against Providence. So I'm gonna be like, you know what? I'm gonna zag when everybody else is zigging. That's just how I roll. But I do think they could beat Providence because that defensive efficiency thing, that Providence just might not be good enough offensively to like really make them pay for that. You know what I mean? They do. You're right. You watch them play and it's like, how is this team winning? They win like 62 to 59. And out of their 62 points, like 23 of them came from the free throw line and they shot 32% from the field. It's an eyesore sometimes. They're setting the game back offensively a little bit. If they're to run up against Iowa, though, that's a team that will get layups all day on them. And I think it's something that they got exposed by North Dakota State in the Summit League championship game is that your boy Baylor Shireman, John, He's like Matt Khalil out there at left tackle. Like he's a traffic cone on the defensive end of the floor. Like oofta. He's slow, and South Dakota State doesn't have a ton of size. Their depth is kind of compromised because of some guys not being on the team and being hurt and stuff like that. So I don't know. I think they're fun. I think that's a team that gives you a first round matchup where it's like, ooh, like this one is like definitely the like high level watchability. But I think getting out of the first weekend's a bridge too far for me. And that hurts. I'm a South Dakotan now. I have a South Dakota since all of a sudden. I can't be saying that too loud. Like I got neighbors here. Like,
well, hey, I mean,
South Dakota State.
we don't want you to put your safety at risk. That's right. Not. Yeah, you don't want to do that.
I have a job in this town.
Final question here before I let you guys go. Which conference do you guys think will have the most success? I mean, you have the Big Ten with 9 bids, so I mean, you're throwing enough, at the board that something's got to stick there as far as winning a few games in the tournament. You've got the SEC with 6 teams. You've got the ACC with 5, as we mentioned earlier. Which conference do you think will have the most success? And if you want, go ahead and throw which one you would think will have the least amount of success. I mean, as far as the major conferences go, I mean, obviously, I'm in MAC country. I went to Ball State. Obviously, I know the MAC is probably going to be out the first weekend. So usually, there's a bunch of conferences you could put as far as least successful. But which ones do you think are going to be the best and worst?
Craig, at first glance, the first 2 that jump out as possibilities to me are SEC and Big 12, and when I look at SEC, they've got teams like Tennessee, Bama, Arkansas, Auburn, Kentucky. So they have a lot of talent. But, I look at teams like Arkansas and Bama, and they're so feast or famine, where I could see a case where each of them are out in the first week. And same with Auburn. I wouldn't call them feast or famine, but they're sort of trending down. And so that basically leaves you with Tennessee and Tennessee, Kentucky, and then who's LSU? LSU, I have no faith in. They're going through a coaching change. Who fires their coach like right before the tournament? I get.
Doesn't that help them?
Yeah,
it could.
They were one of my possible sleeper picks before, and before. Of course, I mentioned hey, LSU could be tough in the tournament, and then 2 days later they fire their coach. So I'm not super confident in that either.
Yeah. But no, and it's close between the SEC and the Big 12, but I'd give the edge to the Big 12. I do see both Kansas and Baylor having considerable amount of success. As far as least successful year, I think Big 10, just because I could say ACC, but the Big 10 has more chance for underwhelming performances, and they have the history of doing it too. You look at a year ago, they had 9 or 10 teams, but then 2 or 3 of those had upsets against double-digit seeds in the first round. So they have the history of it. They have more opportunity. I'd say Big 10 is the one I'd say will be the least successful.
I'm with you on the SEC. I think they've got a great chance. I mean, I just went in depth how I don't think Auburn's that good, and yet it's kind of talk out of both sides of your mouth season here, where it's hey, why would this team not win? But I'll actually still pick them to win. I mean, I think Auburn is absolutely good enough. I mean, they went through they were ranked number 1 for a good chunk of the. There was a month there where they were on a tear, and you look at that front court, Jabari Smith, Walker Kessler. That's teams aren't used to seeing that, and you get in conference play, you get in some of these weird environments where the crowds are rocking, and all those SEC teams are ranked really high. So some of these losses Auburn is taking, not exactly taking bad losses, right? I mean, they're still a good team, and if their guards decide I think they're going to take dumb shots. But I think they're good enough to play through that. And man, if the dumb shots are falling, Auburn's going to be really dangerous. And I do think they've got enough. The talent has never been the question for them. You're right about Bama and Arkansas. I think both those teams have the variance in terms of they could both lose in the first round. I could see Arkansas taking out Gonzaga in the Sweet 16 should those two teams both advance that far. Because of you're right. JD Note is every year around this time we look for who's the Kemba candidate, right? And JT Note is one of those high level guards in a year where there's not a lot of high level guards. He's a guy who could take over a ball game, and who wouldn't love to see Musselman going crazy again? The man takes his shirt off and basically just starts stripping every time his team wins. So who's not in on that? Nate Oates, is a guy who all the swag, right? And he just talks all the crap, and a matchup with him against Coach K in the Sweet 16, That's got some great theater written all over it. It's a team that shoots a ton of threes, and maybe they can wake up the echoes from last year's kind of success. Tennessee's coming in on a tear. Kentucky is a team that we haven't even really talked about tonight. That's a team that, if there's a list of like 4, 5, 6 teams that could win the title, they're on that list, right? I mean, they've got plenty of talent. It's like the oldest team. Like Coach Cal after the games can like take his guys out for beers now because like they're all juniors and seniors. Like it's weird. So I mean, I think they're awesome. So I think the SEC, just not all of those teams, but I think at least 2, 3, 4 of those teams are going to get deep into at least the second weekend, get to the Elite Eight. You're going to get a Final Four team out of that group, I think. I'm kind of opposite of you on the Big Ten. I think now that the Big Ten is like at the lowered expectations, I think people have picked up on the scent. Like the Big Ten, all they do is disappoint us. Michigan is an 11 seed, probably the team that was like the weirdest seeded. Like I don't know where that came from, and yet again, talk out of both sides of my mouth season. I could see them going to like a Sweet 16 Elite 8 run, like because there's a talented group in there, right? And Wisconsin, I could see them going on a run because Johnny Davis just goes Kemba on us, right? He just Kemba's all over the place. Illinois is a team that people can't seem to quit no matter how many times they lose because you watch them get off the bus and they've got a ton of talent. And so I don't know. I kind of like the Big Ten. The team that the league that I think is going to maybe disappoint us, probably the Big East. I think the Big East. You mentioned it kind of that you're a little lower on the Big East than I think we are. Like you said Big East, and I immediately just started like hearing Gus Johnson talk and like hearing the da 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 da. And I was getting fired up myself. So maybe that's where the major conference thing comes from. But I think outside of Villanova, I think they've all got pretty big flaws. And we've even talked about on our show all year how Villanova is like, this is like the least talented, least aesthetically pleasing Villanova team we've seen in years. All I do is trash Nova all season, and yet somehow I've got them going deep. In that same breath, I wouldn't be surprised to see them get got by someone fairly early. So I could see the Big East going out kind of with a stinker early in this tourney.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see, what they're able to do. Wisconsin, you brought up them, and it's, I looked into their numbers about middle of the season. We did kind of a show about, just kind of going at the midpoint of the year for college basketball. And Wisconsin, they were up there like in the top 10, but yet like you look at all their statistical, all where they rank statistically amongst the rest of the Big Ten, and it's all like 10th and like lower. And it's like, wait, how is this team winning games when they're like 10th or worse in every like category you want to look at?
You could cut that last like 15 seconds of audio analysis on Wisconsin, and you could use that for your Wisconsin analysis every year dating back to 2000, every year from now until the end of time, because that's Wisconsin for you. Like they never look good. They do not win the layup line, but they win ball games.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the tournament. We're really excited. John, Biggs, thank you guys for both coming on the podcast. Real quick, let everybody know where they can find you on, social media and podcast wise.
Yeah, so you can find us Twitter at Midcourt Madness, same for Instagram. And I believe we have a YouTube channel. We don't post a lot to that or Instagram, but there is some stuff out there. We have a YouTube channel where we post a few like 1-minute clips. That should just be Midcourt Madness also. I think that's it. I think we had a WordPress for a while, but I think it's been like a year since we posted it.
I didn't know we had an Instagram.
Breaking news.
We have a TikTok too. TikTok. We also have TikTok, Midcourt Madness. There's some short video clips on there too. As you could probably tell, I handle all like the technology side. Biggs just brings he brings all the hot takes here.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. Biggs, what about you? Do you have anything to plug?
No, I think just listen to John. Have him just repeat that again, because that was what he handles all of that stuff. I just show up and start talking to anyone who will listen.
All right, well, I appreciate you guys coming on. Thank you for the insight, and make sure everybody go, listen to Midcourt Madness as the tournament goes on, because it's going to be a lot of good takes, and we're really excited about the tournament. Thank you guys for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having us, Craig.
Absolutely.
Have a good night.
You too. All right, that was Midcourt Madness, the gentleman from that podcast. So make sure you guys are watching, tuned in over there. So let's go ahead and get into our friends of the show. Remember that we are brought to you by Anchor. Anchor is a great website that you can use if you are. Hold on 1 second. Sorry about that. Don't report. Okay. Sorry, I was getting some of the stuff tidied up here. But yeah, we'll start that again. We're going to take a brief moment and talk about our friends of the show here. First of all, Anchor. Remember, Anchor is a great website. We use it every single, for every single podcast. Anchor.fm. It's a great website where you can go and, immediately get immersed, in your podcast. You can either add audio directly to Anchor, or you can record directly to the platform as well, or you can upload anything that you've recorded. And then it allows you to disseminate your podcast to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. It keeps an archive. It allows you to monetize right away. So those are a lot of great features. So if you're looking to get into the podcasting game, definitely recommend Anchor. Also, if you Eat Lunch and Board Game is a podcast that sponsors this show. It is done by Adam Collins. He talks about how board games can build relationships in your community, whether it be, with your workplace environment, anything like that. Board games can build relationships. He has guests on, to talk about different board games you can play. Some of them are a little bit more work appropriate. Some of them are a little bit more for after work hours. So make sure you guys check in there. And remember, you can like us on Facebook, 3C Media. You can follow us on Twitter at 3C Media Sports. You can go to our TikTok channel, 3C Media. Got some best moments of college basketball that we're posting throughout the month of March, as well as the YouTube channel, 3C Media over there. We've got the Hoosier High School Huddle coming out. You guys have been killing it as far as supporting just not only the standalone content, but the Hoosier High School Huddle. And then remember, you can listen to us every week, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course podcast. Also, you can chime in if you want to in the chat. Carter's 2 is in here talking about March Madness. We want to get your guys' feedback, so if you want to hop in here when we record live on Tuesdays, twitch.tv/CraigCrash. So the next part of the show, we're going to do, typically around this time of year, typically for this podcast, we do our bracket. B. Scott and I would fill out our bracket, and so that's what I'm going to do here. I feel a little bit smarter. I feel more able to take on this bracket now that we've heard from the Midcourt Madness guys. So let's go ahead and jump right in here. We're going to have a second little camera of me for a second on the YouTube side, so don't be alarmed there. We're going to move this bad boy right over here, and we've got our bracket. So let's go ahead and fill this out here. We're going to go through... We're going to go through the West region. I'm just going to go region by region this time. I know normally I just like to go like top to bottom on each side, but let's go ahead and go through the region here. Pretty easy to kick off things. We're going to go Gonzaga to win that first game against Georgia State. Gonzaga, I mean, this is a year where I feel a little bit better about Gonzaga than maybe normal. I mean, we talked about it with John and Biggs. It seems like Gonzaga can sometimes trip up. But not against the 16 seed, so I've got Gonzaga moving on. Boise State and Memphis, I mean, diving into it here. Memphis, I guess, has the better pedigree against the top 25 teams. BPI rank a little bit better. I just, see, and this is the thing that gets me when you get to, like, Conference USA and Mountain West teams. I mean, a lot of their games, a lot of their signature wins, like, yeah, some of them are tournament teams, but, like, at the same time, you're battling against your same conference. And I know that that's something that I don't like for college football, but for college basketball, I mean, when you're basing a team's value on what they do in a conference, and that conference, doesn't really have a lot of ranked teams or it doesn't really have any team that you really, like, hang your hat on. I think, I had Boise State, I initially wasn't going to fill out a bracket until tonight, but I did anyway, and I had Boise State initially, but I think I'm going to go Houston here. I mean, you look at it, they've got 2 wins over Houston, the win over Virginia Tech, win over Alabama, wins over SMU, who was the team that was on the fringe, so I actually like what Memphis has done more, so I'm actually going to go Memphis here. UConn, New Mexico State, I think UConn is, I think far and away. I don't feel comfortable picking New Mexico State here. Even though UConn is 3-4 against top 25 teams, I mean, New Mexico State hasn't played nearly the caliber of team that UConn has, or hasn't played nearly the caliber team that UConn is. Arkansas and Vermont. Arkansas, I mean, I know they lost in the SEC tournament, but I'm going with Arkansas here. They're a really good team. They've gotten hot. One of those SEC teams that's gotten hot at the right time. So I'm going with Arkansas there. Alabama versus the winner of Rutgers and Notre Dame. And yes, unfortunately, we do record on Tuesday nights, so we don't have the luxury of knowing who advances. If you put Notre Dame in this position, I might say, like, hey, what the heck? They can beat Alabama. But if they somehow fall to Rutgers, I'm not, if Rutgers is the team, I'm not really too confident in them. So I'm going to go Alabama, although I do agree with what Biggs was saying as far as them being streaky. Texas Tech and Montana State, not going to waste a whole lot of time there. Michigan State and Davidson's interesting. But I think, I got to go with the Big Ten team here. You look at what they've done. 11-9 in their conference, but it's a Big Ten. So I'm gonna go Michigan State here, and then Duke over Cal State Fullerton there. So in the round of 32, Gonzaga versus Memphis. I just excuse me, for the first time, I am in on Gonzaga. Normally, I'm just as the rounds go on, I'm less and less likely to pick them. But I just don't see, with as talented a team as this is. If there's a team that can pull the upset on them, I think it is Memphis. Gonzaga is just lucky they don't have to play West Virginia, as Dan pops in the chat. West Virginia's going to win it all. You know what? They might. I think. Well, hey, last year wasn't it last year that they had the the situation where they're like, hey, if you get a COVID outbreak between the start of the tournament and the end of your conference tournament, they would put another team in. Wasn't that something that they were gonna pull from the next team in? So if West Virginia was in that situation, that would be a good situation for them. I miss when West Virginia was a little bit better. I remember when they made the Final Four a couple of years. And maybe that was at the height of my college basketball fandom, where I'm where I'm thinking it was every year that they were there, but I feel like they were just in a better position. So I'm going to go here in this instance. I'm just not ready to pick Memphis over Gonzaga, so I'm going to go Gonzaga here. Arkansas and UConn, again, I just like what Arkansas has done. Arkansas 4-1 versus the top 25, 20 BPI. I know UConn's 17. Beat Kentucky by 2, beat Tennessee, beat Auburn, swept all their games against LSU, was narrowly missed beating Alabama. Arkansas has had a great season. I'm going Arkansas to win that game. Texas Tech against Alabama. Now you're seeing a little bit behind the scenes of how I fill out my bracket, especially when we do this special. Alabama, they beat Gonzaga, they beat Houston, they beat Baylor. Texas Tech, they beat Baylor twice, Kansas once. They just lost to Kansas in the Big 12 championship game. They did beat Tennessee. They beat Texas. This is close for me. But, like Big said as well, and John said, Alabama can be a very feast or famine team. So I'm going to go Texas Tech here. And then I've got Duke. I just can't imagine Duke not making the Sweet 16 in the year that Coach K retires. Gonzaga versus Arkansas. Yesterday I filled out a bracket, and it had Gonzaga winning it all. I'll just go ahead and be fully transparent. That's what I had. And I felt confident. And then, all the confidence I had in Gonzaga, after the conversation, with Midcourt Madness, they didn't necessarily talk bad about Gonzaga, but they just, brought up, the flaws that they seem to have and how they can sometimes have those off games in the tournament, which is something that I agree with. I agree that in years past, Gonzaga has been a team that has fallen short when it's mattered. That being said, it's tough. If I pick Arkansas, I'm also going to be compelled to pick them over Duke, and I just can't do that. I'm going Gonzaga to beat Arkansas. I think Gonzaga here. I mean, you look at the comparison in BPI and what they've been able to do. I'm just gonna go with Gonzaga to win that game, just because Arkansas, the SEC, has had a great season. Arkansas is a tough team, but I think that streak that they've had is going to run out. And then I've got Duke over Texas Tech, just because I don't have the most faith in Texas Tech. I think this is where the road ends in the Sweet 16. So Gonzaga versus Duke. This is where the streak ends. I know Duke was one of my teams I picked to be a national championship contender, but that was based on purely Coach K, his last season. So I'm going to go Gonzaga to make it out of the West region. So looking at the East here, I've got Baylor over Norfolk State. North Carolina Marquette, talked about the Big East being maybe, a little overrated. So I'm going North Carolina here. Normally I would be compelled to pick St. Mary's to lose in this first round, but I don't have a lot of faith in the winner of Wyoming and IU. So I've got St. Mary's. Moving on. I would love to pick Akron over UCLA. I really would, just because Maction. But UCLA. Texas, Virginia Tech. Breaking down, this part of the tournament. I mean, pretty similar teams. But, it's just Texas right now, or Virginia Tech is just the hotter team. They're just the hotter team. I'm picking that upset. Purdue against Yale. I do have Purdue winning. Yale, I mean, looking at their numbers a little bit, yeah, not super intriguing. I mean, they play in the Ivy League, but I mean, look at their games. Lost by 22 to Auburn, lost by 27 to St. Mary's, lost by 36 to Seton Hall, lost by 8 to Vermont. I mean, obviously they're in because they won the Ivy League, but I still don't think Purdue stumbles there. Murray State and San Francisco, Racers prevail, and then Kentucky against St. Peter's. Kentucky moves on. Baylor, North Carolina. North Carolina goes and they upset Duke, in Cameron Indoor on Coach K's last home game. I had a lot of faith in UNC. They got to 25th ranked in the country. And then, they didn't show up against, Miami in the ACC tournament. So, I mean, you look at it, lost to Kentucky by 29, Tennessee by 17, Purdue by 9. So, I mean, I like Baylor just a little bit more. So we're going Baylor here. UCLA, St. Mary's. Got a lot of faith in UCLA. I have them moving on. Virginia Tech and Purdue. This is a matchup. This is a matchup where I live pretty close to Akron. I'll pick them for you. That's what Dan says in the chat. Hey, I appreciate that. Having my back. Someone's got to have faith in the MAC because it's not me. But yeah, Purdue, Virginia Tech, this is a game that I just don't feel super confident about as a Purdue fan in this situation. And maybe it's, too much recency bias. And I don't want to say Purdue goes down here, but I'm going to go ahead and set myself up for disappointment. I got Virginia Tech winning this game. I know it's rough. I know this is an Indiana-based, channel, but I just can't not pick. I just not that I can't not pick Virginia Tech, but it's just one of those things with the way Purdue's playing now and the way Virginia Tech's playing now is just in total contradiction. So I've got them getting bounced, and I've got Kentucky over Murray State. Just not a lot of faith in Murray State. I do think this is where the road ends for Virginia Tech. Kentucky and Virginia Tech, they play in the Elite Eight. In the Sweet 16. I've got Kentucky winning that game, finally ending the magic. I do, however, UCLA, I can't quit you. You were my Final Four pick at the beginning of the year. I had an Elite Eight in the tier list last week, so they're moving on. Sets up an Elite Eight matchup of UCLA and Kentucky. And in that matchup, where do I go from there? I just don't feel confident enough picking UCLA because UCLA was a trendy pick coming into the season. But they against teams, they lost to Gonzaga by 20. They lost to Arizona twice. They don't have a lot of sexy other wins, whereas Kentucky just does. So I'm going Kentucky to make the Final Four out of the East region. In the West, in the South, excuse me. Arizona moving on. They play the winner of Wright State and Bryant. Easy pickings there. 8 versus the 9. Seton Hall versus TCU in the South region. I've got TCU. You know what? I recently saw a picture of their court. And I like it. I like it a lot. I do. So I'm going TCU to get the win there. Houston, I've warmed up a little bit to them. Watching them in the American tournament. So I do have them beating number 12 UAB. Illinois versus Chattanooga. I know the Mocs had a really exciting conference championship, but I just think Illinois is going to advance. Colorado State, Michigan. Give me Michigan. I think Michigan moves on here. Not, and I see 4 Mountain West teams there, and I know like I'm betraying everything I think in football, where I'm like, these teams from lesser conferences don't even get a fair shake, and then I get to the NCAA tournament, which I get is a different thing, and I'm like, Colorado State, what have they done? And that's just how I feel. Tennessee versus Longwood, go Vols on that one. Rocky Top, Ohio State 7 seed against Loyola Chicago. I should have asked the Midcourt Madness guys this, and I didn't, and I should have. But Loyola, another team, I just can't quit you. I've got Loyola Chicago beating Ohio State. Just give me that upset. I have a little bit. I just don't want to see them lose in the first round. They've had so much success. TCU gets the nod because of their core. Absolutely. That's what Dan says in the chat. I mean, TCU's got a cool court. I mean, if Oregon were in here, they'd get the nod too, because I like Oregon's court as well. Villanova versus Delaware. Villanova, easy pickings there. Easy moving on. All right, so in the round of 32, Arizona over TCU. Give me Illinois over Houston. Just not too much hesitation there. I just think those are the 2 better teams in that situation. Tennessee versus Michigan. This could be a potential, upset pick for the Vols, but I'm going Tennessee here. And then Loyola Chicago against Villanova. As much as I want to see Loyola Chicago keep the magic going, I'm just going to go ahead and pick Villanova here. I want to believe a little bit more, but I think, Loyola Chicago isn't quite the team they've been in years past in this situation. And maybe I should pick them just because I've doubted them the times they've been in the tournament, and they've proven me wrong. So maybe this is the time, but the time I'm going to have faith in them is the time they're going to lose. So maybe I'll just continue to be wrong here, so I'll see them go farther. Tennessee versus Villanova. I think Tennessee's just been through a little bit more as a team. I mean, they play in the tougher conference. They've shown up and played well against that conference. And then the Villanova team, just against the Big East, they're just not, the team we're used to seeing. So I'm going with Tennessee here to win that game. And then Arizona versus Illinois, I am going Arizona here to win that game. Illinois, I mean, you look at their numbers a little bit. 4-4 against the top 25, whereas Arizona's 5-2. Arizona's fourth in the BPI. Illinois is 15th. Illinois did lose to Arizona earlier in the season. Arizona has beat UCLA twice. They've beat Illinois. They've beat Michigan. So I'm going with Arizona here. And then Arizona versus Tennessee. I think that was the game earlier in the season where, Arizona beat Tennessee, or Tennessee beat Arizona by 4 earlier on in the year. And you know what? I just like what Tennessee has been doing a little bit more than what Arizona is. So I know. The Midcourt Madness guys tried to talk some sense into me, and say, hey, you know what? You should maybe. Tennessee's not the team that you think they are. They're not going to go out of the South region. But I just have that twinge in my stomach that says they're going to go on. So I'm going to pick Tennessee to make it out of the South region. So that just leaves the Midwest. Kansas. Over Texas Southern. Texas Southern just won that game. Let me double check because I have it on right beside me here. Yes, they Texas Southern moves on. That doesn't make a difference in who I'm gonna pick. I don't know why. It doesn't. It's not gonna make a difference. I got Kansas winning that game. Creighton and San Diego State. I think if I picked no, I've picked 8 seeds. I was like sometimes I get into a rhythm where I just pick like all 8-9 over eights and just not even notice it. I like San Diego State just a little bit better in that matchup, so I've got them moving on. I've got this weird, talking about like feelings in the pit of my stomach. I have this weird notion to maybe pick Richmond, um, but I'm not. I mean, I know they were kind of a coming out of nowhere team, but it's not super strong. I mean, you got Keegan Murray for Iowa, great scorer, one of the top scoring teams in the country. So I'm gonna go Iowa there. 4 16s in the Final Four. I mean, dude, I would love that to happen. Just bring me the chaos. Bring me the chaos. 13 seed South Dakota State over Providence. I'm going with the Jackrabbits here. I mean, I think this is they're a really good shooting team. I know that we talked about the defensive numbers earlier on in the podcast, but I just like what South Dakota State's doing. They're just behind Gonzaga as far as scoring teams in the country. So I'm going with South Dakota State. LSU, Iowa State. Coaching change has kind of got me off the LSU train. So let's go Iowa State here. Wisconsin and Colgate. Wisconsin moves on. I mean, they're playing toothpaste, so I mean, how strong could toothpaste be? USC versus Miami, the 7-10. I'm going Miami here. Miami had a strong showing in the ACC tournament, so it kind of rights some of the wrongs they've been going through. And then Auburn over Jacksonville State, who shouldn't even. I think that's the team that isn't even supposed to be there. It's supposed to be Bellarmine. So if it was Bellarmine, I probably would have picked them, but they're not in. It's Jacksonville State, so we're going with Auburn there. Kansas versus San Diego State. We talked about Kansas' shortcomings, in the tournament, but now is not the time. Kansas moves on. I'm gonna be completely transparent. I didn't know about all the. Hadn't looked into it quite as far to see the defensive, transparencies, the transgressions that the San Diego State team has, and going against Iowa, who's one of the better scoring teams, who's got one of the best scorers in the country. I mean, that obviously, is a big red flag. But it's one of those things where it's like I have experts on the show, and then I'm like, but I still really want to pick San Diego State. But you know what? That is pretty glaring. So I'm gonna go Iowa here. I love what San Diego State's or South Dakota State's doing. But those numbers have swayed me where they're like 202nd in defensive efficiency. Iowa State, Wisconsin. Give me Wisconsin here. Iowa State, I don't have a lot of faith in. Wisconsin's, been winning ugly all season, so I'm going with the Badgers, 3 versus 11 there. And then Miami versus Auburn. I'm not ready to pick Auburn to lose. I'm not super high on Auburn, but against number 10 Miami, I'm going to go Auburn here. Iowa versus Kansas. You know what? We talked about Kansas' shortcoming as a 1 seed. I think in a normal bracket, I think having them, because in the bracket I filled out yesterday, I had South Dakota State, when I keep wanting to say San Diego State, I had South Dakota State beating Iowa and advancing to play Kansas and then losing to Kansas in the Sweet 16. But in this instance, I think if Iowa played Kansas, I like Iowa's chances just a little bit better. Just because of their shooting, just because of Keegan Murray. I know Kansas has got really strong scorers as well, but I'm going to go ahead. It's these decisions down as you get to the nitty-gritty that make it a little tougher to go on. Against the top 25, though, I think I'm going to go ahead and go with Kansas. It's tough, but I'm going to go with Kansas. Looking at their numbers against the top 25, I just like Kansas maybe to beat Iowa. That's where the streak runs out there. So Kansas moves on. Number 2, Auburn versus number 3, Wisconsin. I'm going to go with... I'll go ahead and pick Wisconsin here. Big Ten pride. Let's go. Over Auburn. Auburn just hasn't been able to string wins together. And while I think they will go to the Sweet 16, I just don't have. I just don't know if they'll be able to have the juice to make it through. To the Elite Eight and Final Four. And then Kansas and Wisconsin. In the Midwest Regional, give me Kansas. They move on to play Tennessee. So that gives me a Final Four of Gonzaga and Kentucky against Tennessee and Kansas. So Gonzaga against Kentucky. I'm gonna go. This wasn't this a matchup from earlier on in the season too. Didn't No, they didn't play. I think it was Gonzaga and Duke who they played earlier on in the season. I look at what Kentucky's been able to do this season. I look at what Gonzaga has, and I just have a lot of belief in what Gonzaga can do. I think this is where the road ends for Kentucky. So I'm going to go with Gonzaga here. Then Kansas versus Tennessee. This is where the road ends for Kansas as well. I like what Tennessee's done. It's the recency bias thing. It's the reason why I picked Virginia Tech to win their game, and it's the reason why I'm picking Tennessee here. I just like what they've done. And then Gonzaga versus Tennessee. It's a tough decision. I mean, you dive into the numbers a little bit. You have very similar points per game, very similar against the top 25, both top teams in BPI. But Gonzaga just scores just a little bit better. And if when Gonzaga's lost in the NCAA tournament, it's been to a very tough Baylor team. That was when they got run out of the gym, and then in 2017 they were playing 2017 they were playing a very good North Carolina team, and they played them pretty well. So I'm gonna go with Gonzaga here. I'm picking the Zags to win it all. I really like what they've done this season. I just have a feeling that this year will be the year that they finally get it done. I do have some faith in them to win it. So that's it. That's the tournament. That's the bracket selection. So I like that bracket. I feel confident in that bracket. And that's where we will leave it for today's podcast. So that'll do it for this week's edition of the Crash Course Podcast. Thank you guys all for listening, and thanks again to John and Biggs from Midcourt Madness for coming off the show. Remember, you can find them, Midcourt Madness, on Twitter, on TikTok, Instagram. They've got a podcast coming out on Spotify, Anchor, all that good stuff. So make sure you're keeping an eye on them throughout the tournament. And remember, you can find us on Facebook, 3C Media. You can like us you can go follow us on Twitter at 3C Media Sports. Go follow the YouTube channel. Go subscribe. Click the bell. You guys have been killing it lately as far as checking out the content and giving it a lot of love, so thank you guys for that. 3C Media on TikTok as well. We've got some content that's specifically for that platform over there, so make sure you're showing that love as well. Remember, we record live every week, twitch.tv/CraigCrash. We had Dan in the chat today, Carter's in the chat today, giving us their input, and it's a lot of fun to get that listener feedback, so thank you guys there. And remember, you can listen to us every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course Podcast. Try to get my music to go again, but we ran out of time on that, so that's fine. It's okay. We're a live show. It's okay. But yeah, thank you guys again for listening. Next week, we're going to come in. B. Scott will be back. We're going to talk, we're probably going to recap some tournament stuff as well as get into the weeds. A lot's happened in the NFL. We're probably going to talk about that as well. And baseball is back. So great time of year. So we're going to get into the weeds of that next week. But until then, have a good one, everybody.